Good morning. How is everybody today? Great. Thank you for coming out. We're going to start by introducing each of our panelists here. I'm going to go right down the row here. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you work for, and what your role is, and how long your company has been using DEI.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zoe Hernandez Wolfe, and I'm with Baptist Health South Florida. I'm the Vice President of Talent Management and Development. I've been responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion now for the last 4 years.
Saran.
Hi, everyone. Saran Tao. My company is called Mirza. I'm one of the co-founders. So I've been working on diversity, equity, and inclusion in my company since the very jump, probably somewhere 3 to 4 years ago.
Great. Stefano.
Good morning. My name is Stefano Boero. I'm the People and Culture Head for Amadeus IT Group, so technology solutions for travel industry, airlines. I've been dealing with diversity for 30 years because my company is doing business in 190 countries, 160 nationalities. Again, diversity is embedded at the core of our business.
Diane.
Good morning. I'm Diane Psaras, and I'm the EVP of HR at VITAS Healthcare. VITAS is the nation's largest provider of hospice care. So our employees are truly angels that work amazing miracles each and every day in supporting folks at their end of life. I've been with the company for 5 years. However, the company has been around for over 45 and has been working on DE&I for those entire 45 years.
Ashaki.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Ashaki Rucker. I work for NBCUniversal. I have been with NBC for about 6 years now, and I lead HR for Telemundo Enterprises, which is our Hispanic language network, as well as for the Latin America region. And we've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work for at least 20 years now as well. So it's sort of embedded in the DNA of the organization as well.
All right, we have a stellar panel here, so let's get rolling. Stefano, with the broad diversity that you have among the staff at Amadeus, how do you invest in individual people to motivate each worker to feel a sense of belonging, to bring his or her best effort every day?
I could answer this question with one word and in 1 second, which is basically leadership. It's all about leadership. Again, my job is a hybrid between HR operations and organizational design operating model transformation. It's a global job. Like many technology companies, we transform every other year. And a big driver of our transformation is what we call transformational leadership. We believe that bringing the best effort, as you ask, is about bringing people together, give clarity, simplifying, give purpose, all concepts that you are very familiar with when you deal with people and with management. It's about aligning people to bring energy, deliver success, and of course, I'm sure that he said best effort. There is a lot of debate between, okay, should you bring your whole self to work or just be put in the conditions to be your best self? In Amadeus, we think that work is work, home is home. There has to be an integration between the two. For some people, they call this balance, but they are two favorite words. We coach our leaders to manage with kindness, with attention to the differences, to the vulnerabilities, to what people bring to work and how diverse they are. But we don't push. We are not part, I'm not part of those head of HR who talk about work is your family, okay? And I don't want to create polemics. And again, for me, in the end, we are hired to do a job and not to bring all our personal life at work. And 30 years of Amadeus, again, 160 nationalities, 40% of women in a gender company, people from different religious background, no one ashamed at the coffee machine to discuss about same-sex partners for the last 30 years. I believe that the result of this very soft approach, more on the long term, paid pretty well.
Great. Thanks, Stefano. So we're going to turn to Saran. Saran, you're ultra focused on equity with the Mirza team. Why is this so important at your company? And please give us some examples of recent successes with equity.
So let's start with, when we break down DEI, we care a lot about getting people in the door. We care a lot about making sure that they feel at home and safe to be themselves when they're in the door. Equity is about actually making sure that every single person has that same infrastructure and setup to be able to succeed. And one of the largest barriers that we have in the workforce is often one that women and caregivers face. It's childcare. So if I back up for a moment and take the success that Stefano has created at Amadeus and look at the fact that 40% of that workforce is women, well, for women to progress at work, the largest issue is childcare. It's the number one contributor to the gender wage gap. So with Mirza, what we do is actually remove that childcare as an obstacle and make sure that we're actually focusing on the frontline employees where we tend to be the most diverse. Think about your support orgs, think about folks who are working in a call center, staffing a store, or working, really, what is that front lines, working as a nurse. Those tend to be our most diverse roles. So equity really matters because equity is how those folks actually have the support they need to be able to start growing within the organization. So I'll give you one of my favorite examples, if you'll humor me for a quick story. So this is probably one of I would say not necessarily a success story, but a large part of why and how this could become a success story. So think about 2015. I had just joined Uber in New York City. We were at a place in the company that we were still sending all these McKinsey consultants to go to the JFK parking lot and run after taxis with phones. Deeply unscalable. So my job at the time was make sure this is no longer the case. So I built a large hourly support org, predominantly single moms because I'm raised by a single mom, and eventually had a 200+ person team that was able to successfully bring tens of thousands of Uber drivers online every single month. But what I wanted to create in that organization was that stepping stone. So that single mom in an hourly support job can actually keep progressing to become a supervisor, to become a manager. That didn't always happen. And the reason for that was childcare. I can't tell you the number of conversations I had with employees who turned down a promotion because they would lose access to government childcare benefits. That's not an equitable workplace. So what's worse was finding out that some of those same people actually take out loans in the summer because they couldn't access subsidized summer care. Again, those are obstacles that make it impossible to actually have equity at work. And so one of those success stories, actually, one of the employees I tried to promote twice, who does have a loan, not because of the summer, but because she wanted her child to go to a higher quality care. That employee eventually had to jump and leave that organization. And one of the folks on my team, who was one of her mentors, actually was able to hire her into a manager role that allowed her to skip over a bunch of those levels that actually created the ability to forego government childcare benefits. That's how equity is happening right now. And that's the problem that we all really need to be fixing in the workplace.
Powerful. Thanks, Saran. So this next question, I'm going to start with Ashaki. It's a multi-part question. We're going to really get our money's worth with this one. And I'm also going to see if any of the other panelists want to take this one on too. But we'll start over here with Ashaki with this question. So DEI has become a very popular punching bag for certain state and federal politicians. Why do you think DEI is so misunderstood in the workplace?
I think there are a couple things. One, I'm not necessarily sure that I would categorize it as misunderstood. I think some of what we're seeing, one side of the coin, is opportunistic politicizing of hot topics like diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly as we're going into an election season. As we are, you typically will find politicians take big swings at topics that they think are going to drive voters in their direction. So I think that's one piece of it. And then I think the other side of it is, as we begin to make consistent progress, in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, you have some constituencies who want to either create fear or confusion where we've had a lot of clarity. And, at NBCU, it's pretty straightforward. All of the programs and initiatives that we drive are meant to create equity, create inclusion, and create a respectful work environment. So when these attacks show up, I think the opportunity for us as an organization is to ask ourselves those questions. Are the initiatives doing what we intended them to do? And if they are, we need to continue the course and not allow for these attacks to take us off track or become a distraction from the work that we're setting out to do.
So you've set me up perfectly for the next question. So before I see if any of our other panelists want to answer that one, I'll let you go with this. So when you're assessing when some of these talking points make news, can you give us an example of how you may turn that into a learning opportunity at your organization?
Sure. At NBCUniversal, we actually have a learning series called Meet the Moment. And it's a collaboration between our corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion and our corporate learning and development team. And what the Meet the Moment sessions are meant to do is create space for us to be having ongoing conversations about topics that are timely and relevant for the moment. So the most recent one was on the war, and we kind of leaned in really heavy to focus on mental health and providing our employees tools for how they can ensure that they're taking care of themselves. We're in media, so a lot of our editors and journalists are actually up front and close to the violence that we're seeing. We've also done sessions on unconscious bias. We've done sessions on intersectionality. We've done sessions on the lack of representation of Hispanics in Hollywood. So what we're trying to do is ensure that as an organization, we're setting the tone and creating the space to have meaningful conversations about whatever the topic is of the moment. And then we actually facilitate debrief discussions as well. We do watch parties, is what we call them. So we are doing watch parties when the session is released across the organization. And then a combination of HR or our employee resource group leads will facilitate a debrief discussion. And then we always have follow-on tools that leaders and or employees can leverage, because the way we see diversity is, yes, we need to upskill our leaders and managers to be setting the tone for the organization, but whatever seat that you're in, frankly, in an organization, we see an opportunity for you to create a space to make someone feel welcome, safe, I love that word, seen and heard within the organization so that they can do their best work. So that's our ongoing learning series.
Thanks very much, Ashaki. So I want to turn and see who else wants to take on this one. And it looks like, you do, Zoe.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and take on either one or both parts.
Sure.
A little bit about why you think that DEI might be misunderstood or slightly misunderstood, and how you can take some of these political talking points and make very useful learning opportunities from them.
Right. I totally agree with what Ashaki was saying, that our politicians tend to over-exaggerate, and there's misinformation out there on both sides of the political spectrum. And when you really get down to it and you pull people together in a room like this, where you see so much diversity, you see so much commonality amongst folks, you don't see the discord that happens. A lot of times, I think what we end up seeing on the news or in the media or on social media is the vocal minority, and then everyone gets lumped into that pocket of conversation. And the reality is that we can all come together and we can all really have conversation and dialogue that advances our different positions. We can have disagreements, and that's perfectly acceptable. But what we see out there, I don't necessarily believe that it reflects who we are as an American nation. And so for us at Baptist Health, our philosophy on DEI is really about inclusion, but at the expense of no one. So we want to make sure that regardless of what your religion, your race, your background, who you are, that you bring that whole person to self, but we don't want someone to feel ashamed, guilty, bad for who they are, just because the message out there might be something a little bit different.
Okay. Thank you, Zoe. Does anyone else on the panel want to offer perspective on this question before we go to the next one?
I can make a few comments. Again, I won't go on the political side. I'm the foreigner on the panel, so I'm the less well-placed. As an European, I can say that on the other side of the world, yes, D&I is losing momentum too, unfortunately. When I look, I can give you two figures. The attrition in HR executive roles is around 20% maximum. On D&I in the last 15 months, 18 months has been close to 70%. So it gives you an idea on the disillusion or the unsatisfaction with the topic, even within the HR community. Again, without being provocative, I believe that D&I, if not handled with care, can bring more damage and more problems than anything else. D&I can be very divisive in some companies, and particularly from when I come from technology is a very male-oriented profession, particularly in software engineering. And when you start in companies where males are 60% plus, talking about that overnight, because of a board, because of an ESG, because of the owner, because of the press or the politics, you need to promote more women, more gay, more lesbians, more black, more Italians, more Asian, whatever you want. It's not good, it's divisive. So if D&I is currently backslashed, it's because we in HR have done, or we at company level, I believe we have done something wrong. We have been too light. We cannot deny the correlation between diversity and business performance, but some colleagues, they think that just by increasing the number, the performance or the business is flourishing. It's not like that. It takes years and years and years. And it takes a change in the values, a change in the identity of the company. It takes the employee and the management. It's often we say top down. It's not about posters or it's not about quotas. I hate the word quotas. I can live with targets because sometimes you need to be intentional. But when you start doing that, you have a tick the box exercise. I have leaders that come to me and tell me, Stefano, I have hired a woman as an executive. And I'm like, and so what? Was she the best? And so you create, and it's not only me and other companies, including my company, we have this problem that have unfortunately made a lot of bad for D&I.
Okay, thanks, Stefano.
Paul,
Sure.
I just want to add something on that because I think it's a really important point that you raised, Stefano, and it's one that I think we all face when we're doing this work, is that when we start to talk about diversifying talent in organizations, there's an automatic question that comes into play around the quality of the diverse candidates. And I do think it's really important that, you know, we in the seats that get to influence strategy and how the strategy gets executed, that we're really clear that there is no benefit to the organization to sort of forego quality at the benefit of just ticking the box. So within our organization, it is always about getting the absolute best and most qualified hire. That is the end game for us.
Right.
That then lends itself to the increase in performance, et cetera. But I do think that's a very personal one for me because it's very real and tangible, but it's also speaks to a little bit of sometimes the unconscious bias that sits there connected to the fact that when you diversify, it automatically means that there's going to be a sacrifice on quality. So I think we all just have to be, one, really careful that that's not happening, but two, continue to educate around, you know, the kind of quality candidates that exist, whether they be female or LGBTQ or African American, whatever the spectrum is. I think that that's a huge point because I feel like that's what sometimes facilitates us losing momentum because there's this automatic assumption that quality is going to be sacrificed. So thank you.
Good. I think this one's really resonating because I saw all the panelists shaking their heads. Great. All right, we're going to move on here. I'm going to go to Diane with this one. So Diane, please give us a rundown of what ideally DEI would look like and should include when VITAS is working with the medical staff and families to develop end-of-life cares.
Sure.
Care
well,
plans, that is.
Absolutely. So I'll start by just building off of that last discussion and saying, really, DE&I is about people being comfortable where they work, who they work with, that they're treated with respect, and that the folks that we serve in our world, our patients and their caregivers, feel comfortable and can relate to the teams that they work with. And it goes far beyond the numbers. It's really about how work gets done. And so for us at VITAS, DE&I takes on many dimensions. And it starts with us having a diverse group of talent. Diversity by way of not only their ethnicity, their gender, and likewise, but also diversity by way of clinical professionals. And that said, it does stem back, as I said earlier, way back 45 years ago, when our founders began what is called interdisciplinary teams, which we have in our organization, which is having doctors and nurses and social workers and chaplains come together and be able to develop and execute flawlessly on every patient's caregiver plan. And that said, everyone is unique. Every situation is unique. So the power of having that collaboration of thought from the various disciplines is just essential in making sure that every patient gets the right care for them. And as you all know, hospice is end of life, and hence that situation is continuously evolving at the bedside. And so our folks, our employees truly value having this group of professionals to pick up the phone when that patient goes imminent and be able to call in a doctor, call in a chaplain, confer with the social worker, to be able to ensure that that patient and their family is getting everything that they need. And that's essential to us. It goes beyond just the training, goes beyond certainly the numbers. It's really about providing the best quality of care at the end of someone's life.
Thanks, Diane. I'm going to come over here to Zoe at Baptist Health. So I understand that you have this annual DEI Leadership Summit. So tell us all how that has inspired and fostered greater understanding of DEI among the managers at Baptist Health.
Sure, thank you. I think it goes back to what Stefano started us off this morning. It really is about leadership. And so our belief at Baptist Health is we want all of our leaders to embrace DEI. And so the way that we do that is we engage our senior executives from the very top. They play a very visible role at the summit. We have a very wide range of speakers at the summit. It's anything from like mental health to unconscious bias to microaggressions to LGBTQ rights, whatever it may be. And then there's typically a call to action as well. And so with this call to action, if we're having a discussion about disability rights and hiring folks with different abilities, then the call to action to our leadership teams is how many of you can hire someone on your teams who is differently abled than what you currently have? What positions can you convert so that someone who doesn't have the abilities of someone on your team might be able to take on that role? Another thing that we did was we worked very closely with our business resource groups and we asked them for their input. And there was this high demand for mentoring programs. And so all of our BRGs wanted to have mentors and for us to establish a mentoring program. And so as part of the summit, we launched that mentoring program and we asked for people to raise their hands to be both mentors and mentees. So it's really a way to bring in the entire leadership team to embrace DEI in whatever area they might be passionate about. So if they're passionate about LGBTQ rights, they can engage in that manner. If they're passionate about employees with disabilities, they can hire those folks. If they want to mentor someone, they can mentor. So it really just is trying to meet our leaders where they are so that they can find a way to embrace DEI and bring it forward in the organization.
Thanks very much, Zoe. We're going to go to Saran on the next question. So Saran, you've told us that you spend a considerable amount of time and energy to recruit a diverse team at Mirza. And even though it's a small team, it's critical with that team to have a diverse staff. So how do you ensure that your clients' employees are working in an equitable company when they walk in there?
Yeah, so a bit of context for what we do at Mirza. So I spoke a lot earlier about making sure that we're removing childcare as an obstacle for parents, for caregivers, often moms. When we say this, we're just dancing around the topic. We're focused on low-income workers and hourly workers. And those are the folks we need to be able to keep our operations running. My team was the reason there are this many drivers in New York City on the Uber platform, and teams like mine all over the country were responsible for that. So it's really, really critical to the business. And these are oftentimes the folks who are the most diverse parts of the business. So we provide the tools that help our clients be able to actually build very real progression tracks and allow those folks to keep coming to work every single day. So Mirza helps those families access the government childcare benefits that they're eligible for. It's a huge amount of paperwork if you even know that this program exists. And that's part of the reason less than 20% of families who should be getting government childcare subsidies actually do. So think about the value of that. How many people here are caregivers? Yeah, it's a lot of folks. And how many of you have looked at what you pay for childcare and gone, oh my God, how do I afford this? So this is pretty common across the board. 40% of parents are in debt over childcare. So with Mirza's platform, we plug into a workplace and then identify who are the folks who actually should be getting those government childcare dollars and then help them access that. And as a result, we're helping companies actually then keep those really critically important and also very diverse employees and actually have the structure they need to keep progressing in their jobs and keep progressing at that company.
Thanks, Saran. Ashaki, I'm going to come back to you. I want to go back to something that you raised earlier in the discussion, and because it's extremely timely, and I think we can really impart some good lessons here from this, and that's this Meet the Moment series. So can you explain to us a little bit about the origin of this series, how it came about, and how you can tell that it's working in terms of DEI and enhancing DEI? If there's any examples that you can give from any of these series that you say, okay, I'm feeling good about this, this is getting traction here on the team.
Yeah, I think, let's see, the origin, I'll start there, was following George Floyd's murder. So that was the origin. I think, most of us experienced this sort of outcry in our organizations after George Floyd's murder around, okay, what are we doing as an organization? And I think people just had a lot of emotion, frustration, questions that they wanted the organization to address. So that was our first Meet the Moment. That was the origin. And I think the company wanted to ensure that we, facilitated a collective and consistent message about how we were viewing diversity, equity, and inclusion as an organization, and also giving everybody at all levels globally the tools to have effective conversations on topics that are really, really sensitive for people, which I think, is the danger. You want to be able to have conversations, but you want to make sure that those conversations are safe and handled well around topics that are really sensitive. In terms of us moving the needle and examples of success from Meet the Moment, I feel like a lot of it is around language and tools, and also how we've integrated a lot of the messaging, language, and learning into sort of ongoing practices. So for instance, one of the things that we've done in the last, I guess it's been 4 to 5 years now, is we've integrated a question into our performance management process around how employees can help to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion within their day-to-day. It seems like something really, really small, but one, it's integrated, it's organic, it doesn't feel like this other thing, and it drive some accountability for every individual to be thoughtful about where they're sitting in the organization and how they can help diversity, equity, and inclusion, continue to be fostered in the organization. And for me, I've been doing DEI work for about 30 years as well, similar to Stefano. And one of the things that I always love is when the efforts really become just incorporated in an organic way, so that DEI doesn't feel like this other thing that somebody else is supposed to be doing or owning, but that everybody in the organization, sort of wrap their head around, okay, even from my seat, how can I contribute? We always hold leaders to a higher standard for sure, and we've done some dedicated training for them as well, but I love that we're embedding that in terms of how can leaders ensure that they're bringing the best of the skills and capabilities. You talked about that, because at the end of the day, we're running a business, and I think creating those spaces where people feel like they can bring their full selves, their best ideas to the forefront, and how leaders help shepherd that forward is where we really move the needle in terms of the day-to-day business that we're trying to drive. And we're seeing, I think, even in our employee survey scores are probably the biggest example in very specific data around people saying, I unequivocally feel like this company values me as an individual, and I feel like we're really serious and consistent about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That question for us on this survey has been a 90+ response rate in the positive in terms of the work that we've been doing. So we take that as a very clear, direct signal as well.
Thanks, Ashaki. So we have time for one more question. I'm going to take it over here to Diane with this final question. So how do you incorporate DEI? What kind of tactics, strategies, when you're using it to try to boost employee leadership development?
Sure.
So in addition to formalized training and a number of tools that we have to support our leaders and our folks at the bedside with cultural training and the ability to understand how to respect differences and the varying degrees within different cultures, we also, one of our strategies is to engage our leaders in the partnerships that we have with many community organizations. And so to do that, we literally have one dedicated professional as a leader who has been doing this for over 20 years, and her efforts are at the forefront of our community engagement with respect to getting in within our communities of color and supporting minority healthcare professionals as they continue to learn and develop. So the whole point of her efforts, which she brings along our leaders, is to educate and empower those folks. And so we partner with organizations like the National Black Nurses Association, where our leaders support development of tools that are available to many within the community so that the clinical teams can actually bridge the gap in their conversations between the medical and the spiritual element when they're having conversations with patients. We've had a long-standing relationship with the Black Nurses Rock organization as well, whereas our leaders have had the opportunity to actually perform training with clinical professionals to help them be ambassadors for the advanced planning model. And so those types of efforts have really strengthened our communities and in turn strengthened our leaders because they're right in the thick of it and they're learning firsthand the importance of DE&I.
Educate and empower. Perfect way to end our session today. I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much.